You were promised a tsunami of news, and so it shall be. So,
right,
when last you left the story,
yeah.
what was the last thing that you saw in the news? So we know exactly what we're leaving off.
So
here.
the last thing that I know of was the day that I got off shut down everything. The last thing that I heard was that the New York Times hired that writer, the female Asian writer, and apparently she had tweeted a lot of anti-white.
Right, Sarah Zhang, yeah.
Okay, so I know nothing. For all I know, she doesn't have a job now. She does have a job. She has a bigger job than ever. She has a show on CNN.
She has a job.
So she has a job at New York Times.
Right, and there was blowback on anyone who suggested that she was a racist. A lot of the left came out and said that she couldn't be racist because racism is actually discrimination plus power.
Yeah,
so
which is nonsense.
Right, so she still has a job.
Yeah.
And that's totally okay.
Let's be very clear on this because I am feeling clear-minded right now. Racism is hating someone because of their race. It has nothing to do with power.
That was my impression.
You can be black and hate white people and you're a racist. You can be white and hate Asian people and you're a racist. And you can be Asian and hate Latino people just because of their skin color and you are racist.
No, not according to the New York Times. So
the New York Times is wrong.
Right, so that's the end of that story. Meanwhile, Alex Jones got banned from Facebook and iTunes.
So she still has a job there. So I saw a bunch of the tweets. The only one of the one tweet, look, I've joked, before I sort of woke up politically, I used to joke about Republicans being old white men a lot and whatever, and it was just stupid jokes, and I don't regret them because it's just part of what made me, sort of. I think they're stupid and they were short-sighted and maybe not very informed at that time. But the one tweet that I did see, and I think this might have been quite literally the last thing I saw before I shut down, was there was something about she loves making old white people cry or something like that. And I thought that kind of strikes me in a different way. You know what I mean?
So there was a big argument that took place over Sarah Zhang, not just over her actual comments, but over whether she should be fired based on Twitter mobbing. So there's a big sort of discussion that happened about social media mobbing and people piling on and whether people ought to be fired and lose their jobs over old stuff that they've tweeted. And of course that followed in the wake of the James Gunn stuff, which you were still here for. That was James Gunn from Guardians of the Galaxy. You remember this whole thing?
So that happened just as I was getting off, and I was
exactly. So James Gunn, who's Guardian of the Galaxy director, he lost his job because there were some old tweets of his that were making jokes about pedophilia and such. And so there was a lot of talk about Twitter mobbing, and then the Sarah Zhang thing happened, and that was a Twitter mob. And so there was a lot of talk about not whether she should have been hired, which is a separate conversation, but whether people should lose their jobs based on people digging up crap you did 10 years ago and now coming after you.
So let me get this straight. So she still has a job despite all that stuff. Roseanne Barr does not have a job because of one tweet, which I actually do believe that Roseanne didn't know that Valerie Jarrett was black. And
Roseanne's a crazy person.
Roseanne is what she is, right? So
Roseanne, she's a self-described crazy person.
But, well, it depends which person you're talking to. There's a lot of people there. But I just want to understand all this. If you're trying, because when you step away, it does seem a little odd. So Roseanne sends this one tweet, which she apologized for, said she didn't know that she was black. There's no reason to think that Roseanne has a history of racism. She's always been fighting for lefty causes forever, actually. So she gets fired from the #1 sitcom in the country. Then this girl, sorry, one more time.
Sarah Zhang.
Sarah Zhang, because I'm out of it a little bit.
She maintains her job. Correct.
She maintains her job, and Gunn got fired.
Gunn got fired. There was an attempt to bring him back, but that kind of failed.
Yeah.
Because it turns out there are pictures of him at some joke pedophilia-themed party with the women were overage, but they're dressed as school children and such. So Disney was not going to maintain his job. So
I don't even know what to do with all that. But I think partly, I guess, and I guess this is from stepping away for a little bit, it's just this sort of when we apply the standard. And that I think that's what's driving people crazy, probably mostly conservatives and people on the right, because it seems to always weigh much more heavily on you evil people.
Right, well, you saw one of the facets of this that you missed was, so Candace Owens then tweeted out everything Sarah Zhang had tweeted, but with reversing the races, and Twitter immediately suspended her before they realized what she was doing. Good
move, Candace.
Yeah, so that was good. Okay, so meanwhile, Alex Jones gets banned from Facebook and iTunes. There's a coordinated hit on Alex Jones between, I believe it was Facebook and YouTube and iTunes, to demonetize him and deny him platforms.
Wow,
basically.
all in the same day?
All in the same day. I think it was within 48 hours. So it's fun to break this stuff to you. And
wow.
So,
wait, so just demonetizing him?
No, I think YouTube actually took down his entire channel.
Oh, wow. Wait, so Alex Jones is not on YouTube?
I believe so. I haven't checked recently, but yes, that was the story.
And they all did this on the same day?
Within 48 hours. So it was obviously a coordinated hit. Obviously a coordinated hit.
Wow.
And so they took him down. They gave various reasons why, but they didn't give any sort of objective reason why. So it wasn't like, some of them said it was because he had threatened violence in the past. Some of them said that it was because he had said unpalatable things in the past, but there was no clear standard. And so there were a lot of folks on the right saying, listen, even if you don't like Alex Jones, you know, people. I said this. I'm no Alex Jones fan. I mean, he's threatened me personally many times, right? But you got to at least articulate a clear standard for how you're going to police the boundaries here. Otherwise, everybody ends up in the throw them overboard category because these boundaries are randomly expanding. So yeah, Alex Jones got hit. He hasn't really paid any serious monetary price because he has alternative distribution channels, and he's insulated himself.
But if you lose those things, you get a massive hit.
Oh yeah, no, I mean he obviously took a serious hit. Although his listenership, I'm sure, is up because people are tuning in because of that.
So where do you stand on this now? Because, you know, for the last 2 years, I've been saying relentlessly the answer is not government intervention. I just don't think that the government policing Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all those things, that will help anything. I think it would muck things up even worse. It would give more power to just middle management bureaucrats. And since the government's not very good at anything, I don't think it would be very good at...
so President Trump has, this is one of the other stories, President Trump has sort of jumped into this and suggested regulation. So Trump's
still president?
He's still president.
Oh, okay.
He's still president. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, all right.
You came back in time.
Okay.
You didn't miss the big finale.
Oh.
But this is
I didn't miss number 20 there?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Yeah.
But he was suggesting regulation. Some other Republicans have sort of put it out there. I don't agree with regulation, but I do think that we're going to have to come up with either some market-based solutions, or we're going to have to, recognize and force Facebook and Twitter to be treated as not platforms, but as actual publishers, which is the real controversy over Facebook. Is it a platform or is it a publisher? Like over at Daily Wire, which I run, if we print something that is libelous, we'll be sued.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, legally libelous, we'll be sued. If Facebook puts up an article by us that is libelous, then Facebook doesn't get sued. It's a platform.
Yeah.
But if they're not policing what can be put up and what cannot, at what point do you start saying, well, you're just like the Daily Wire or the New York Times or CNN, and you start getting policed that way? I think that Facebook either needs to demonstrate, what its objective standards are, or start getting treated like any other publisher in the space. Because if they're going to police, then they're policemen.
Yeah, so you're right, and you're being consistent with, I think, what your other views are in this department. But there's this piece of me that it's like, did we miss the boat in a weird way? Now that I've stepped away for a bit, like with the amount of people that are watching Rogan and watching you and me and the rest of and Sam and everybody else, it's like, why don't we have a network already? You know what I mean? Like, I know there's endless discussions about it. We've had discussions about it. We've met with people. But it's almost, it almost is like there's some other weird thing here. Like the amount of power that these companies have now amassed over us is bizarre. And it's like, if the crew of us can't figure out how to do it, who can figure out how to do it? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it does. I'm a little. I mean, this is where, of course, I'm for the market dictating it. So it's like, it's on.
So let's get on it.
Yeah, like let's get cracking. Because at the end of the day, look, forget Jones. He's irrelevant, I think, in the scheme of whatever. But it's like, at the end of the day, you get rid of him. Well, now you've moved the bar. There's a lot of people that think that you're an extremist. Oh, by the way, so I do want to mention this real quick. So there were a couple. 2 or 3 little things that were rattling in my head about current events while I was away. And one of them was, a few weeks before I went offline, was the Mark Duplass thing with you. And for some reason, it was really sticking with me while I was gone. Because for those that don't remember, Mark Duplass, who's a friend of mine, who's been on the show, who is a lefty and a extremely decent human being.
Yeah, seemed like a nice guy.
I had breakfast with him like 2 weeks before the tweet was sent out. He is a really nice guy. He's trying to bridge the divide.
He came to the office. We spent an hour and a half together. He seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah, that's it. He's just a nice guy trying to do some nice work. He mostly does comedy stuff. So he tweeted out basically that Ben Shapiro isn't the devil.
Right, exactly.
That's basically all he tweeted out.
I had good intentions and I was a nice guy.
Yeah, that's it. And basically that people should take a look at you.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah, give him a follow if you're looking for somebody who's honest on the other side of the aisle or something.
And so this happened a little bit before I went off the grid.
But he deleted it and then he tweeted an abject Maoist apology.
So the mob comes after him. He then tweets this thing about how he doesn't stand for homophobic or racist views, implying basically that you're
racist,
a racist
sexist,
or all the usual nonsense. And I don't want to make this about Mark because I think he's a good guy and I don't know what pressure came to bear on him, either from studios or the mob. And it scares people. You don't want to lose your job.
I texted him when he deleted the tweet and I said, I totally understand why you do that. I get it. And then the next morning he tweeted out that was a racist, sexist, so good times.
But that was really rattling in my head because as I've stepped away, it's like, I know, and this goes to what I said earlier, we need these middle decent people who are willing to figure some things out. And it's like, they basically took him out. Like, and when I say they, it's like, who knows what that is? Is it just the mob? Is it, studios. I don't know exactly what it is. But like, those are the types of people that we need. And this is why I would link it back to the Alex Jones thing.
Yeah, they're shrinking the Overton window.
The Overton window will continue to shrink. It's like, all right, we get rid of Jones one day, and no one wants to defend Jones, so fine, okay, he's gone. But they'll keep moving it, and they'll keep saying that Shapiro's this or Rubin's that or whatever it is, and eventually we'll be on the outside of that thing too. And that's very much on my mind right now.
Okay, so in other news, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez continues to sort of gain steam as this.
Really? So she's gaining steam in a good way?
I think that she continues to gain sort of public prominence. She made a bunch of gaffes while you're out.
Yeah.
She suggested the middle class doesn't exist anymore. She suggested that everybody in the country, even though the economic statistics are good, that's only because everybody has 2 jobs. So you saw that
one.
Okay, and then there was a bit of a tiff because I offered to host her on my show or debate her.
Oh, right.
And I offered to drop $10,000 for the privilege, and she suggested I was catcalling her. So that was her response, was that I was catcalling her, and there were mainstream editorials in the New York Times suggesting that it was sexist for me to offer her.
Are you kidding me?
No, that was good times. Not a major story, but drove the news cycle for probably a couple of days.
I know you well enough. You offered to debate her. You offered to debate her or interview her?
Either one. I said whichever one you want. I said I'm happy to have you on the Sunday special, which you've been on for a discussion. I've had on a bunch of people I disagree with. I had on Sam on that special.
Yeah.
I've had on Eric on that special. I've had on a bunch of people with whom I disagree on a variety of issues on that special.
Yeah.
And I said I'll give $10,000 to charity or to your campaign or a super PAC, whatever you want, or we can do a debate, whichever format you choose. And she tweeted back that there's no reason for her to respond to this is the equivalent of men catcalling women, which is like, I don't know how they catcall women in the Bronx.
No, that's the equivalent of men treating women equally. That's what it is,
that's
right?
What I thought,
you're not viewing her, you're not going, I want to talk to this woman because she's a woman so I can destroy her. You're going, this is somebody who I disagree with, or at least I want to explore their ideas a little bit more. We'll do it either way you want.
Also, catcalling and me. Weird move. So that was kind of a minor story, and I don't want to hover on that one too much because it's too self-centered.
But it does go to sort of a bigger thing that these people are put out there with their ideas that all sound good. All of this, I mean, this is another thing that was rattling in my brain a lot. That all of this leftist stuff that I used to buy, you're for gays, you're for this, you're for poor people, it's all bullshit. It's all epic, endless horseshit. I mean, that really is all it is. You're not for gays. You know what I mean? It doesn't even make sense to say you're for gays because gays think differently. It's incredible. You'll never believe this. You get 10 gays in a room, they probably have 12 different opinions. And to say that you're for black people, are you for black conservatives? I mean, I know you know this stuff, but again, when you step away from it, it's like, in a weird way, and I really hate to do this, but in a weird way, Catherine Burble-Singh, who's the last guest I had on last week, but we had taped it at the end of July. She's an educator in England. She had taught in the inner cities for a long time and basically realized that all these guilty liberals were just kept throwing money at things that were keeping minorities oppressed. And she said something that really hit me, and this is the last thing that I did before I left. She was basically saying, these people are the racists. They're the modern racists. And they're always screaming that we're all the racists. And I don't want to become them. So I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, you know, these lefties are all the racists, blah, blah, blah. But the racist ideas of the day are not coming from conservatives and libertarians. They're really not. And they're certainly not coming from classical liberals. Mm-hmm. They're coming from the progressives. That actually is just true. It just is. Okay, Shapiro, keep going.
Let's go. Okay, so let's do a bunch of Mueller updates because there was a bunch of news, sort of Mueller land.
But you've already told me Trump is still president, so they didn't storm the castle yet.
Right. The latest generic congressional ballot has Republicans down. I think it was the NBC ballot today has them down 18. So
do you buy that?
I buy that Republicans are down. I don't think they're down 18, but I think the Republicans have some serious problems in the midterms. I mean, Democrats have a lot of motivation to turn out. And they have since the election, because they feel like if they had turned out, they would have won the last election, which is true. So that's been building. So here's what happened. I'm going to lump these all together because there's a lot. Okay, so Peter Strzok got fired over at the FBI. Mm-hmm. So Peter Strzok, as everyone recalls, is the guy who is texting with his paramour Lisa Page and leading the Russia investigation and the Hillary investigation. And he was fired for essentially sullying the reputation of the FBI. So he ended up being fired. President Trump revoked security clearances for people like John Brennan, the former CIA director.
There were rumors that was going to happen.
Yeah, so he did that. He revoked his security clearance.
So what do you make of that? Because I'm not an intelligence analyst at the highest levels here, but the idea that Brennan and some of these guys were taking classified information and clearly leaking it to the media or the Times or whatever, like, forget what the information was, forget that Trump is president. If anyone was president and former officials who still have clearance, which is also a little unclear to me, why as a former official would you have clearance?
Right, so I mean, I guess the basic idea is that a former official, if I go to you for advice, I need to be able to ask you about that stuff, and it's still a crime if you leak classified information to the press, even if you no longer work for the government. That said,
right, so that's a real windy road right there.
There shouldn't be, in my opinion, there shouldn't be like a blanket security clearance you get to maintain after you leave office. It seems silly to me.
So who else? Was it anyone else important? I'm sure Brennan was probably the biggest one.
Brennan was the biggest one. He threatened to do it to Comey, who I think no longer has clearance, and a bunch of other. Basically, what it looked like was a coordinated political hit by Trump, because Trump then went on Twitter and said, like, everybody I hate should no longer have a security clearance. And so people said this is misuse of power, which, of course, President Trump doing everything in the dumbest possible way, it sort of is.
Yeah.
But that said, should these people have security clearances? Probably not. That was the minor news in this area.
Really? I mean, that's huge in a certain respect, but okay.
Here's the major news. Okay, so the major news is that Michael Cohen, the president's former personal attorney, pled guilty to 8 different crimes, including violation of campaign finance law. And in that plea of guilty for violation of campaign finance law, this is the red wedding part, he suggested that the president of the United States ordered him to violate campaign finance law. So
ordered him before he was president, so just as...
So here's what happened. He goes to pay off Stormy Daniels via basically David Pecker over at the National Enquirer. The idea was that this was a campaign finance contribution, that he had bought the story of Stormy Daniels from the National Enquirer in order to silence it. Okay. David Pecker had gone and bought Stormy Daniels' story, and then Team Trump buys the story from David Pecker, reimburses Pecker for the story to keep it quiet.
Whose money was that?
So it was Michael Cohen's money.
Yeah.
So it looks like a campaign contribution, and then Trump backfills the amount of money that Cohen paid over the course of coming months.
Right.
Now the question is whether Trump knew that he was violating campaign finance law when he did that.
Right.
So in other words, there are 2 ways he could have, just legally speaking, there are 2 ways that he could have avoided this being a campaign finance violation.
He could have flat out written the check.
He could have written the check directly.
Okay.
And then he would have had to report it as a campaign expenditure, presumably.
But why couldn't he write it? Why a campain expenditure? Why couldn't he have just written the check?
So he can write a check,
account.
but he has to report that to the FEC.
Right.
Or he can have Michael Cohen write a check. Well, he would have to do it personally, or he'd have to show that he basically used Cohen as a pass-through, and then report it to the FEC. But there was no report to the FEC, right? So basically the idea was that they found a back channel to pay her off, just so it wouldn't be reported a week before the election. And so the idea is that he was essentially avoiding the reporting of the Stormy Daniels thing a week before the election by paying off a porn star. And Michael Cohen was saying that Trump knew all of this, and Trump ordered all of this, and that's why he did all of this. So
how are we supposed to get any truth out of this? This is the type of thing where it's like, again, stepping away, it's like, all right, we can do all the little legal loopholes, the little minutia, and look back on 2 years ago and who did this and that. But it's like, Michael Cohen probably wants to save his butt now from a certain amount of jail time.
Right.
So he's going to do whatever he can, obviously, to throw Trump under the bus. I have no doubt that Trump probably did some things more out of just like bravado and stupidity than like intention. Like, do you think he really was, like, the crime that they're going to get Trump on was that $250,000 payout to a porn star? Like, how stupid is this whole thing?
Well, so there are 2 ways in which Trump could defend himself. One, he could say, listen, I pay off ladies all the time. So this isn't a campaign expenditure at all. This is just me paying off ladies.
Do we know, is there any history of Michael Cohen doing this for him before?
So there's a history of Michael Cohen kind of threatening people before, but we haven't seen evidence that he's like paid off a bunch of ladies before. And the other thing that Trump theoretically could do to avoid all of this is he could say, well, Michael Cohen's the lawyer. I didn't tell him to violate campaign finance law. It's his job to make sure that I'm in compliance with campaign finance law. I'm an idiot. So what do I know about campaign finance law? I just said, Michael, go settle this thing up.
I mean, that's the Hillary email excuse, right? Like, You know? I'm an idiot.
And it's not implausible, right? I mean, that's a plausible defense. That said, his personal lawyer is testifying in open court that Trump told them to violate campaign finance law. Does that mean Trump gets prosecuted? No, because you can't prosecute the former president. You can't prosecute the current president of the United States, just legally speaking, in all likelihood. But will that be ground zero for any impeachment charge? I'm sure that it will be. The same day that happened, by the way, because we're all living in a TV show. The same day that happened, Paul Manafort, his former campaign manager, also pled guilty to 8 felonies, none of them having to do with campaign Trump. but having to do with former campaign finance violations and representing the Ukrainian government and all of this kind of stuff. And then Trump starts tweeting about how Manafort's a good guy because he kept his mouth shut, which is because President Trump has diarrhea of the Twitter.
Well, first off, so wait, so Cohen's going in there and saying Trump told him to violate campaign finance? I mean, that sounds actually insane. So if that's actually true, like if Trump actually sat him down and was like, here's the check, let's violate some campaign finance, like now we're veering into like true.
Is that plausible? Well,
that sounds completely bananas, but
it depends how much plausible deniability you need, right? If Trump said, here's a check for $130,000, go settle this up. And Cohen said to him, well, we need to report that to the FEC. He said, well, let's do cash, right? Then you've got a problem. But we have to see what that looks like, and it hasn't been taken to that level yet. The SDNY is still checking into that. And
so a guy that's doing your show every day, talking about this stuff every day, I know you research thoroughly, all of that. How do you find the ability to talk about the ins and outs honestly without giving enough room where people are just going to guess on all of these things?
I mean,
because even that right there, like that's some real nuance that's not going to be put on CNN.
That's right. I mean, on CNN, it's he violated campaign finance law. This is a federal violation. He should go to jail.
Yeah.
And the answer is, well, that depends on the credibility of Cohen. It depends on Trump's defense. It depends on a lot of stuff. Trump doesn't help himself because he goes on Twitter and just says shit. Right? I mean, that's his thing. But
think about that. I have not seen a Trump tweet in a month.
Well, good for you. 34. I mean, that's a daily relief, I'm
Shapiro, 34 fucking days. I haven't seen a Trump tweet.
Well, I mean, get ready, man, because there's some more coming. So that was it. So that was the big story because now the Democrats.
But how old is that story already?
That story is 2 weeks old.
So it's like, is it already running out of steam? I mean, everything kind of.
Although maybe it's contributing to the congressional ballot, for example, because it feels like there's a level of corruption that is being exacerbated by another political story, which is 2 Republican congresspeople are being prosecuted for corruption right now. Duncan Hunter down in SoCal in San Diego. He's being also prosecuted for looking like he basically took a bunch of campaign funds and used them on personal expenditures. And Chris Collins over in New York, these were the first 2 congressional candidates who backed Trump. And Collins came forth and supposedly was engaged in some sort of insider trading deal. So both of them are now going to be prosecuted by the Sessions DOJ, which has led President Trump to attack Jeff Sessions at the DOJ, and literally this morning last night tweet out that Jeff Sessions is killing Republican congressional chances by indicting Republican congresspeople. So that's all.
Look, the president, he has his right to free speech. He's going to end up probably screwing himself over with all his exercising of it. But all of that, like when I'm hearing this, it's like, man, this is all just a great reason to ultimately be a libertarian. Like, it seems like none of this works.
This is right.
None of this actually works. Like, if it all worked, if there was a slim, trim operating government that didn't have too much power and could just move things on the margin and not try to redistribute and all of these things, it's like, and it worked, and it wasn't always, all government does is investigate itself. All it does is throw money at things. Like, it doesn't do anything. So all of these things, as you're telling me, I know these are important, relevant things, and when I fully dive back in, like,
but in 6 months they may not be, and in 2 weeks they may not be, because.
But at least understanding the issues behind them are important. Yes. But like this general thing of like, oh, this guy campaign finance, this guy that. This is all they do. This is all they do. And if you think Democrats are somehow better than Republicans, you're wrong. They're all doing it together.
So I'm sort of grouping these into political, and then we'll do some, and then there's a bunch of cultural stuff that sort of happens. So other political stuff, the Kavanaugh hearing is happening literally as we speak right now. The Democrats tried to shut down the hearing from the beginning by calling for an adjournment until they could read the documents, even though they've already come out and said they're not voting for Kavanaugh. Linda Sarsour got arrested because she showed up and started yelling at Kavanaugh and at the Republicans, and so it kind of devolved into the spectacle we all knew that would be.
You know what? In the spirit of my 34 days off the grid, I'm not going to say a word about Linda Sarsour.
Well, good for you, dude.
That is some inner peace right there, man. I am not. Wait, pause though. So there's nothing they can do to stop Kavanaugh,
no,
right?
He's
that's going to happen. You can, for the record, people can find this video somewhere, but when I was on TYT way back when, and Harry Reid used the nuclear option, and I was still progressive, lefty, liberal, blah, 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 I said this is a bad move. This is a bad move. You do not want to give this kind of power because it'll be used against you. And
a bad move it was. So there are 2 anti-Trump books that have come out. The first was from Omarosa Manigault. The media went nuts over this. She had recordings. She'd taken her cell phone into, like, throughout the West Wing and recorded a bunch of conversations with pretty much everyone.
Is that legal?
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. There was nothing classified on the recordings.
Okay.
It's basically she had nothing to sell and she sold whatever she had.
Yeah.
But it was nonstop on cable news for 24 hours a day for a week, and maybe 2 weeks.
But she didn't get him saying anything.
And then he tweeted out that Omarosa was fired like a dog, and something like that. And once he called her a dog,
you're getting better at that.
It's improving gradually. But once he called her a dog, then it turned into, is Trump a racist? Because he called her a dog, even though he has called half of humanity members of the canine species. So we enjoyed 2 weeks of Omarosa
calling someone a dog
talk.
Is actually an upgrade over
what he usually
what I
calls
think
people.
of most humans at the moment.
That's exactly right. And then Bob Woodward's book comes out this week, and there are a bunch of sort of typical Trumpian stories. John Kelly saying this place is miserable to work, and James Mattis saying Trump is basically a nut who wanted to pull completely out of South Korea and ask for preemptive military options against North Korea, and various I think it was Gary Cohn like sneaking documents off of Trump's desk so he wouldn't sign them and Trump not noticing. So all the things that you would expect in the Trump White House. So all that's coming out in Woodward's book. So expect Trump to tweet about that a lot this week. And then we get to some of the cultural issues. Okay. So